Hi friends and neighbors, this is Michelle Kisner here with another foraging video. I'm at Reichmuth Park, which is in Southland Park, the Southland Park neighborhood. It is the end of June, so it's a very different mix of stuff that we're finding right now. Most of those tender greens that come up when it's wet are all dried and gone to seed and done, but there's still lots of stuff we could be finding right now. So the first thing I wanted to show you is something that they're actually not quite ready yet, but this is something that we're all probably pretty familiar with around Sacramento, especially if you spend any time at the river, and that is blackberry plants. So there's a plant right here. You can identify it by its thorns, and it has these leaves that come in groups of 5, and when the blackberries come in, so they make these little white flowers, these 5-petaled white flowers, and then they start to come in. Right now they're just green, but soon they'll ripen up, and once they're black and you touch them and they can squish just gently a little bit in your fingers, then you pop them right off and they're delicious. So there's also another thing growing right here mixed in with the blackberries that you also find all over Sacramento, and that is grapes. So the grapes are also not ready, but I'll show you the plants so you know what to look for. So the wild grapes that grow around here, you can find them just vining on anything. So these are actually kind of choking out the blackberries. So there's blackberries and grapes just all tangled together. But grapes have these like pretty good sized leaves. They're just like a little bit smaller than my hand, and they're lobed like this. And you can see them vining. And then the grapes that grow around here, I saw some. I'm gonna see if I can find some just so you can see the little ones. They're not ready yet. They are sweet, they're good to eat when they are ready, but they do have seeds. So you can eat the seeds, they're edible, they're just hard. But they actually have some really nutritious oils in them. So they're tasty, they're nutritious. Here we go. There's some young ones right here. So it's the end of June, so this is like about the size. I just grabbed this little stalk right here. So they'll be ready again in, another month or so. All right, I've walked a little more and I have found a really delicious and nutritious plant. We have to be very careful with this one. I only wear gloves when I handle it because it is stinging nettle. So here's the plant right here. I'm not going to touch it because I don't have gloves today, but you see it has these like serrated edge leaves that come down to a point, and if you look closely you can see all the little hairs that it's covered in, and both the stem and the leaves are just covered in it, and if you touch it they just like get stuck in your skin, and it's just itchy and burny for like an hour or two depending on how badly you touch it. So what I do with this is I collect them up. I make sure I have gloves and long sleeves, and then I put them just in a brown bag and I dry them out, and then I use it for tea. It's very, very high in iron, very nutritious. It's often found in like the herbal teas for women because of the nice high iron content, and women also often don't get enough iron. So that's what I do. The tea, it's good. It just tastes like kind of green, very like earthy and green. Some people will steam it. I'm always worried to work with it fresh. Once it's dried, you can touch it okay and it's not too irritating. But when it's fresh, I'm just like too nervous to work with it. But you could steam it or saute it and eat it. And again, is very nutritious and just high in iron. So that's stinging nettle. Another fun thing about foraging around wild places in Sacramento is you sometimes find these lovely volunteer fruit trees that just, got dropped by birds who picked up their seed somewhere. So one thing that you often find, especially along some areas where they could grow some deep roots to get wet, are fig trees. So here I'm kind of like in the middle of this fig tree right here. And fig trees have huge leaves that are heavily lobed, and they have 5 different sections. So that's how you can identify it. So then when you see a fig tree, and then the bark also is very smooth and brown. There's that bark. Yeah. And then you can look for figs. The thing about volunteers is they may not always produce fruit. The fruit may or may not be good. So this one has some little baby ones on it that are not ready yet. So we'll see. Come back here in a little bit. Maybe they'll be ready and you can find some figs right here in the park for free. And if you're somebody who likes figs, you may know just how expensive they are in the stores. So it's nice to enjoy them here. So here it is from afar. They can grow in kind of any way, but this one, because it's not being tended, is kind of like a big bush in a way, and it's kind of growing under this other tree. There it is. A quick note about fig trees. Their leaves are toxic, so do not eat the leaves, and even touching them can be really irritating to the skin. So if you're going to be really picking figs for a while, I would wear long sleeves. If all you're doing is just collecting a couple, you'll be okay, unless you're super sensitive. But yeah, just be aware of those leaves. They can be pretty intense. Now I'm over by another volunteer tree. This one's a mulberry. Mulberries can grow very tall, and sometimes they can be fruiting or not fruiting. The fruit could be white, the fruit could be pink, the fruit could be black. This one I have seen fruit on before, but it's either too late or it didn't produce any this year. They're not always going to produce every year. But just to take a look at the tree, it has these like pretty big leaves, gently serrated edges on the leaves, and it grows quite tall. And the leaves we call this a simple leaf when it's just like that kind of basic teardrop shape, and it's not lobed. So there's this beautiful tree. No fruit on it that I'm seeing today. One other volunteer tree that we find a lot is volunteer plums, or things of that same, in that same family. So like plums, peaches, apricots, things like that. Usually the volunteers of those kinds of seeds, though, will end up being some kind of plum. So here, there's this tree right here. It has smallish leaves, smallish simple leaves. It's kind of being overgrown by grapes. You could see like there's some nice bunches of little green grapes here. But there is some fruit, and this is the time of year to be enjoying this. So starting now, this is still a little firm, so even in like another week or two, these will be really good. And trees in this family, when they're flowering, they have 5 5-petaled flowers, not little, like this big. They can be white, they can be pink. So if you've ever seen like cherry blossoms or peach blossoms or apple blossoms, these are all part of that same family. So you can kind of tell that family. Sometimes also another wild variety that you'll find sometimes are almond trees. I know there's one at William B. Pond that I've seen. There's one at Paradise Beach. So that's another. That and the plum are kind of the ones you're going to find. And these plums, so because this is being choked out by the grapes, if you look around, you can kind of find a lot of stuff happening here, and it actually kind of spread itself out. So then if you go like over here, like there's a plum all the way down here. So it's kind of spread out to try and find the light. And you know, these plums are yellow. Sometimes they might be reddish, but most of the wild ones I find are usually yellow. I found a ripe blackberry. So there's a little more sun over here.
Can I eat it?
So there's one that is ripe that will be enjoyed by this child. I'm in this other part of the path that's very sunny, and I'm seeing a lot of different stuff here. So first to point out is this kind of clover. So things in the clover family are edible. Some of them, certain kinds of clover, actually have like anti-cancer properties. And they're just generally kind of one of those all-around nutritious herbs that you can dry and put in tea or throw in your smoothies. So clover, you know, has those 3 leaves. There are various kinds of them. And then the flowers here, you can eat the flowers as well, are like, you know, these bunches with tiny petals. It's lots of tiny flowers all in one. So I don't know how well you can see that. And these ones are pink. I don't know the specific name of this flower. I just know it's a kind of clover. Another thing I noticed, which is a revisit from the last foraging video, is the plantain is going to seed. So we talked about plantain, how you can eat the leaves, you can use it in a tea, you can use it topically on your skin medicinally, but the leaves are, the seeds are also edible. So the seeds aren't actually ready yet on this one, but once they are, you can kind of just pull them off and eat them. You can eat them raw. The seeds, personally, I think the seeds taste better than the leaves. So the seeds I might take them and then mix them in with like a multi-grain something I'm making, like pancakes, or mix them in with my bread. So another quick note on plantain. Last time I showed you the narrow leaf, but here we actually have a lot of the broadleaf plantain, and some of them, it gets very wet here, so some of them really grow really nice and big, but they have the same properties where they have these vertical veins growing along the leaves, kind of parallel to each other. That's plantain. And then another thing we have here is dock. So most of this grows as a weed in people's gardens as well, but this curly dock here, it has these pretty good sized leaves with they're really pretty thick. They have like a thick center stem. When they first grow, they just grow in a bunch coming off the ground, and then these are all going to seed now. So they have this big stalk, and this one's growing taller than me. They can grow as tall as like maybe to my hips, or taller than me like these. So these are all already gone to seed, and they're just covered in all of these. Dock, every part is edible. So you can dig up the root, and if you cut it up and dry it, it makes a good tea for digestive issues. It's very, very bitter, so use sparingly because it's pretty intense to drink, but if you throw a little in, it can really help, like with digestive stuff. The leaves are edible, but they're very, very high in oxalic acid. So oxalic acid is something that occurs naturally in a lot of greens. Like spinach, which is actually in the same family as dock, but and if you cook it, it'll get rid of the oxalic acid and it'll cook it out. And if you eat just a little bit, it's fine, but it does stop your body from absorbing calcium, so you just don't want too much of it. So the main trick with dock is you want to eat the leaves when they're smaller and younger. So I wouldn't eat the leaves of this dock plant right now, nor would I eat the root because it's already gone to seed, so all of its energy is in the seeds, not in the roots. So I would have dug it up earlier for the roots. But the seeds you can also eat, and they're like just a really good grain. So this is something where I'll just I'll pull these off, and so now I have a clump of seeds, and I'll just gather. I mean, these ones have like spider webs on them, so I'm not going to save these, but I just put them in a container and then stick that in my pantry, and then when I'm making something with grains in it, I just throw those in for a little extra nutrition. So that's dock. And I'll find something else soon. Another fun thing we see a lot of in our wild spaces are wild roses. So they can be thorny, just like the ornamental roses. Their leaves are much smaller, and also their flowers aren't quite as ornate. But they have these little leaves. They do have thorns, and they make, right now they're in the stages where they're going to seed. They've already made the roses, and next they make what's called the rose hips. Where is it? There we go. So the rose hips, these are not ready yet because they're still green, but they'll actually turn red. And these are very, very high in vitamin C. They're kind of seedy, so they're kind of like, they're good to chew on and then spit out. But yeah, in a little bit of time when they turn red, they'll be ready to just eat. Or you may have heard of rose hips in tea. You can dry them and then put them in your tea. So that's another fun thing to harvest.